Imagine this. You wake up one morning and the world is finally, irrevocably perfect. Not for everyone else, just for you. Every dream you ever chased has been caught. Every ambition realized. The career you bled for is a resounding success, recognized and rewarded. The relationships you nurtured are stable, loving, and free of the usual friction. Your health is impeccable, your mind is clear, and the future stretches out before you like a calm, sunlit sea, a predictable, orderly, and guaranteed expanse of contentment. There are no more mountains to climb. The dragons have all been slain. The existential dread that once gnawed at you in the dark hours of the morning has been silenced by a chorus of achievements. You have built for yourself a fortress of happiness, a crystal palace of logic and success, where every brick is a rational choice and every window looks out onto a landscape of your own making. It is everything you ever told yourself you wanted. It is the victory you sacrificed your youth, your sleep, your very anxieties for. And yet, as the days turn into weeks of this serene perfection, a strange disquiet begins to stir within you. It's a subtle hum beneath the surface of your placid reality, a dissonant chord in the symphony of your well-being. You find yourself staring at the smooth, unblemished walls of your life, and an unspeakable urge rises within you, the urge to see a crack. You walk through your beautiful home and you feel a phantom impulse to smash a vase, to throw a chair, to introduce a single, jagged note of chaos into the flawless harmony. Why? Why does the architect of a perfect life secretly wish for a storm to tear it all down? What is this perverse instinct that finds the taste of guaranteed happiness bland, almost nauseating? You look at your loving partner, your successful children, your secure future, and a whisper from the deepest, most forbidden part of your soul asks, "Is this all there is?" This isn't just a fleeting moment of ingratitude. It is something deeper, something primal. It is the recognition that in the eradication of all suffering, something essential has been lost. The struggle, the doubt, the pain, they weren't just obstacles to be overcome. They were the very forces that carved out the dimensions of your being. Without them, you feel flattened, reduced. You are no longer a protagonist in a gripping story, but a character in a solved equation. The answer is happiness, the formula is complete, and the book is closed. Could it be that we don't just tolerate suffering, but actively seek it? Not in the obvious self-destructive ways, but in the subtle choices we make every day to reject the easy path, to embrace the difficult conversation, to climb the unnecessary mountain. Could it be that the human spirit has a greater, more terrifying ambition than mere contentment? Perhaps what we truly crave is not the placid comfort of the destination, but the excruciating, vibrant, and unpredictable aliveness of the journey. This is the great, unsettling question that Fyodor Dostoevsky dragged out of the shadows of the human soul. He saw this paradox not as a flaw in our design, but as its most defining feature. He dared to suggest that if you were to offer a man a world of perfect satisfaction, a utopia of endless sweetness and security, he would, out of sheer spite and a desperate need to prove he is more than a cog in a predictable machine, smash it all to pieces. He would choose suffering, chaos, and even self-destruction, not because he is irrational, but because his freedom to choose, even to choose pain, is more precious to him than any happiness that could ever be given. We are all living in the shadow of that choice. We build our crystal palaces of routine, security, and rational self-interest, all the while harboring a secret, untamable desire for something more. But what is this hidden force that makes a mockery of our pursuit of happiness? What is this phantom limb of our psyche that aches for the very pain we believe we want to escape? The answer lies deeper than mere psychology. It is etched into the very blueprint of consciousness itself.
This hidden force, this phantom that haunts our happiest moments, is not a malfunction. It is the core of our humanity, screaming for air. Dostoevsky gave it a voice in his Notes from Underground, a voice that crawls from the basement of our sanitized, rational consciousness. His underground man is the ultimate anti-hero, a spiteful, contradictory creature who declares that he would rather have a toothache than a world without pain. Why? Because the toothache is his. He can feel it, rail against it, and in his suffering, he knows he is alive and, most importantly, free. He sees humanity marching toward a future of perfect logic and reason, a crystal palace where every action is calculated, every need is met, and the laws of nature, summed up as 2 + 2 = 4, govern all. In this utopia, free will becomes obsolete. If science and reason can predict your every move, your every desire, are you anything more than a piano key being struck by the laws of nature? The underground man's answer is a resounding, guttural no. He proclaims that the one thing logic can never account for is the human desire to act against one's own best interests, simply to prove that one is not a piano key. He will desire the absurd, the destructive, the painful, because in that irrational choice, he asserts his sovereign self. The desire to smash the vase in your perfect room is the underground man in you, reminding you that your freedom to choose ruin is more valuable than a happiness you did not freely choose. This isn't just the rambling of a bitter nihilist. It's a profound philosophical insight that Friedrich Nietzsche would later build upon with his concept of the will to power. Nietzsche understood that the primary drive of life is not to seek pleasure or avoid pain. That is the morality of herd animals. The primary drive is to overcome, to discharge strength, to grow, and to feel the exhilarating resistance of the world pushing back. A life of placid contentment, of green pasture happiness, offers no resistance. It is a state of spiritual decay. In the crystal palace, the will to power has nowhere to go. It turns inward like a disease, becoming resentment, spite, and a desperate craving for destruction. Recreate our own suffering, the unnecessary drama, the self-sabotaging career move, the pointless argument, because a spirit starved of genuine obstacles will invent its own just to feel the glorious strain of overcoming them. Your ennui in paradise is the cry of a will that was born to fight, now being asked to do nothing but passively enjoy. Psychologically, this rebellion has a name. It is the eruption of what Carl Jung called the shadow. The shadow is the repository of everything we repress in ourselves to be socially acceptable, good, and rational. Our animal instincts, our rage, our irrationality. The more you strive to build a life of pure light, order, and control, the darker and more powerful your shadow grows in the dungeon of your unconscious. It does not disappear, it waits. And when your conscious life becomes too perfect, too predictable, too one-sided, the shadow will burst forth to restore balance. It is the sudden, inexplicable urge to lie, to cheat, to betray your own best interests. It is the part of you that is drawn to tragic stories, violent movies, and tales of fallen heroes, because it recognizes its own nature in the chaos. The perfectly managed life is an affront to the wholeness of the psyche, and the shadow's rebellion is a violent, often destructive attempt to make you whole again.
This silent internal war is not fought with hypotheticals in the quiet corners of philosophy. It is a battle that spills out, invisibly shaping the very architecture of your life and our society. The unseen consequences of this paradoxical thirst for suffering are all around us, disguised as progress, wellness, and common sense. They are the invisible bars of the cage we mistake for a sanctuary. Consider the very wiring of your brain. Evolution did not design you for the placid contentment of the Crystal Palace. It designed you for survival on the hostile plains of the savannah. You are equipped with a powerful negativity bias. Your mind is like Velcro for bad experiences and Teflon for good ones. A single insult can ruin a day filled with compliments. A minor setback can overshadow weeks of progress. This isn't a defect, it's a feature. The ancestors who spent their days blissfully admiring the sunset instead of anxiously scanning the horizon for predators were the ones who got eaten. Your brain is a problem-solving machine, hardwired to seek out threats, discomfort, and dissonance. What happens then when you place this ancient survival hardware into a modern world relentlessly optimized for comfort and safety? The machine keeps running. When there are no genuine tigers to fear, your mind will invent them. It manufactures anxiety out of minor social slights, spins catastrophic futures from trivial uncertainties, and turns interpersonal disagreements into existential threats. Your own biology becomes your saboteur, seeking out the friction it needs to feel engaged. We are neurologically predisposed to find the crack in the flawless wall, to zoom in on the single imperfection in a sea of good, because our brains crave the engagement that only a problem can provide. This relentless, subconscious search for trouble is the first unseen consequence of our flight from suffering. This is compounded by the cruel joke of the hedonic treadmill. Psychologists have shown time and again that your level of happiness is remarkably stable. When something good happens, you get a promotion, fall in love, win the lottery. Your happiness spikes, but then, almost inevitably, it returns to its baseline. The joy fades. The new reality becomes the new normal. The palace once built is no longer a palace. It's just home. This biological failsafe prevents us from being permanently derailed by either ecstasy or despair. But it also makes the deliberate pursuit of lasting happiness a fool's errand. You are chasing a horizon that moves with you. The trap here is insidious. The constant failure to achieve a state of permanent, blissful contentment creates a chronic, low-grade sense of dissatisfaction, a feeling that something is wrong. This feeling, in turn, feeds the underground desire for a jolt of anything, even a negative one, to feel alive again, to reset the system. On a societal level, this paradox becomes our cultural mythology. We don't tell stories about people who were born happy, lived comfortably, and died peacefully. Those stories are boring. Our heroes are forged in fire. We romanticize the tortured artist, the no pain, no gain athlete, the CEO who survived on ramen and 2 hours of sleep. Our entire cultural narrative is a testament to the idea that meaning is not found in happiness, but is refined through suffering.
We have built a world that publicly worships at the altar of comfort, convenience, and positivity, while secretly, in our art and our myths, we worship the purifying power of pain. This cultural schizophrenia leaves us stranded. We strive for a life our own stories tell us is meaningless. This is the blueprint for a silent dystopia, the one Aldous Huxley warned of in Brave New World. He envisioned a society that had conquered suffering not through tyranny, but through pleasure, not with whips, but with a drug called soma that provided instant, consequence-free happiness. The result was a world of infantilized, passionless humans who had traded their art, their science, their love, and their very souls for a state of perpetual shallow contentment. They were not unhappy, but they were barely human. This is the ultimate unseen consequence. Our modern world, with its algorithmic comforts, its curated social media feeds promising frictionless connection, and its relentless therapeutic culture aimed at eliminating every negative feeling, is building its own version of that world. We are constructing the most comfortable, predictable, and logical prison ever designed, a crystal palace made of data and dopamine. The more we succeed in smoothing over the rough edges of life, the more we starve the parts of ourselves that give life its depth and meaning. The system designed to deliver happiness is, in fact, an engine for producing the very meaninglessness that sends us spiraling into despair, seeking ever more extreme ways to feel something real. We are caught in a feedback loop. The emptiness of a life without struggle fuels our desire for even more comfort and distraction, which only deepens the emptiness. We are trying to solve the problem with the tool that created it. So, if the path of happiness leads to a gilded cage, and the path of suffering leads to self-destruction, where do we go? How do you rebel against a prison when its walls are made of your own desires? The escape does not lie in choosing one over the other, but in a radical rebellion against the very premise of the choice itself.
The rebellion begins here. It begins the moment you realize that the cage is not made of steel bars, but of the question itself. How can I be happy? We have been conditioned to believe that life is a binary equation, a choice between the sunlit comforts of the crystal palace and the dark, spiteful cellar of the underground man. Happiness or suffering, pleasure or pain. This is the false dichotomy that holds us captive. To break free is not to choose suffering over happiness, but to discard the entire spectrum. The true rebellion is to stop chasing a feeling and to start building a meaning. The most powerful articulation of this rebellion comes not from a philosopher in a comfortable study, but from a man who survived the absolute negation of human happiness, the concentration camps of the Holocaust. Victor Frankl, a psychiatrist who lived through Auschwitz and Dachau, observed a strange and profound truth. In the midst of unimaginable, meaningless suffering, the people most likely to survive were not the physically strongest, but those who held on to a sense of purpose. It might have been the thought of a loved one waiting for them, a manuscript they needed to finish, or a divine calling they needed to answer. They had a why that allowed them to endure any how. Frankl saw that the primary human drive is not a will to pleasure, but a will to meaning. This is the key that unlocks the prison. Stop asking what you expect from life and start asking what life expects from you.
The question shifts you from the position of a passive consumer of experiences, waiting for the world to deliver a feeling called happiness, to an active agent, responsible for injecting meaning into an often indifferent universe. This meaning isn't a grand abstract revelation. It is forged in the grit of commitment. It is found in dedicating yourself to a cause greater than yourself, in the transcendent power of love for another person, or in the courageous and dignified stance you take toward a fate you cannot change. This reorients your entire relationship with suffering. In the pursuit of happiness, suffering is a bug, an error in the system to be patched, medicated, or distracted away. In the pursuit of meaning, however, suffering can become a feature. It is no longer an obstacle to life, but a part of the raw material of life. It is the resistance that strengthens the muscle, the pressure that creates the diamond. Dostoevsky understood this perfectly. The redemption of his characters, like Raskolnikov in Crime and Punishment, never comes from finding happiness. It comes when their suffering becomes meaningful, when the agony of their guilt forces them into a profound confrontation with themselves, leading to spiritual transformation. They don't escape their pain. They finally understand its purpose. This is the practice of what the Stoics called the art of acquiescence, and what Nietzsche later termed Amor Fati, a love of one's fate. It is not a passive resignation. It is an active, fiery embrace of your life, exactly as it is, with all its triumphs and its horrors. It is looking at the pain, the struggle, the unfairness, and not just bearing it, but willing it. To say, this too belongs to my story. This hardship is the very thing that will carve depth into my soul. This is the ultimate act of rebellion against the victimhood narrative that our comfort-obsessed culture promotes. You cease to be something that life happens to, and you become the force that gives meaning to whatever happens. How do you begin? You start by choosing the difficult path, deliberately. Not out of self-hatred, but out of a desire for growth. You have the hard conversation instead of avoiding it. You pick up the difficult book instead of scrolling through the easy feed. You commit to the craft that demands discipline and invites failure. You engage in what psychologists call a flow state, where you are so absorbed in a challenging task that time, ego, and discomfort melt away. In these moments, you are not happy in the shallow sense of the word. You are something far more profound. You are engaged. You are purposeful. You are fully alive. You reclaim your power not by controlling your feelings, which are fickle and fleeting, but by choosing your focus and your response. The world will always present you with chaos and pain. The Crystal Palace is a mirage. But your freedom lies in your ability to metabolize that pain into meaning, to transform the lead of raw suffering into the gold of purpose. You stop trying to build a fortress against the storms of life. Instead, you become the storm. And in that shift, a final, deeper truth begins to emerge, a realization that will redefine not just your pursuit of happiness, but your understanding of reality itself.
You have been given the compass. You have turned from the hollow pursuit of happiness to the noble, arduous path of meaning. You have learned to embrace your struggle, not as a curse, but as the chisel that sculpts your soul. But there is one final turn of the key, one last door to open. And what lies behind it is the most terrifying and liberating truth of all. The entire battle you have been fighting between happiness and suffering, meaning and chaos, has been predicated on a single fundamental illusion, the illusion that there is a separate you at the center of it all, a fragile self that must be protected, satisfied, and redeemed. This is the ultimate truth. The very entity that craves happiness and fears suffering is a ghost. It is a construct of thoughts, memories, and anxieties, a tightly wound knot of consciousness that spends its entire existence trying to secure its own permanence in a universe of constant change. This ego, this small, terrified I, is the architect of the Crystal Palace and the prisoner of the underground. It is the source of the paradox. Its desperate need for security creates the desire for a predictable, painless world, and its equally desperate need for significance creates the rebellion against that very world. The entire drama is a civil war within a phantom. To break free, truly and finally, is to go beyond the creation of meaning for the self. It is to undertake the terrifying act of letting the self dissolve. This is not an act of destruction, but of liberation. It is the realization that you are not the small, isolated wave trembling with the fear of crashing upon the shore. You are the entire ocean. The suffering you were so desperately trying to avoid was never just your suffering. It is the suffering of the world flowing through you. The joy you were chasing was never a personal possession to be acquired. It is the joy of existence itself, of which you are an inseparable part. Dostoevsky, in his deepest spiritual insights, gestures toward this. The ultimate salvation for his tormented characters comes in moments of ego death, a profound mystical connection to the whole of creation, what he called sobornost. It is the moment the walls of the self crumble and the individual consciousness merges with something vaster, with humanity, with God, with life itself. The frantic assertion of one's own will finally gives way to a quiet, powerful surrender to the current of being. Imagine the self as a dam you have spent your entire life building, stone by painful stone, to hold back the terrifying, unpredictable river of reality. The pursuit of happiness is the frantic effort to reinforce this dam, to plug every leak, to create a calm, predictable reservoir of personal experience. The pursuit of meaning is learning to channel the river's immense power, to build turbines in the dam that can turn the pressure of suffering into the electricity of purpose. But the final rebellion is to realize the dam itself is the problem. The ultimate freedom is not in managing the river, but in dismantling the dam completely and allowing the river to flow unimpeded. What does this feel like? It is the release of a tension you have carried since birth. The exhausting work of self-preservation ceases. The fear of personal annihilation vanishes because the entity that could be annihilated is seen for the illusion it is. In its place is a profound sense of peace that is not contingent on circumstances. It is a peace found in the heart of the storm, not in its absence. When you are the river, you do not fear the rapids or the waterfalls. They are simply expressions of your own nature. Pain and pleasure, success and failure, life and death, they are no longer opposites in a battle for your soul. They are textures, colors, notes in the single, magnificent, and often agonizing symphony of existence. This is not a retreat from life, but the deepest possible engagement with it. You can now act with a courage you never thought possible, love with an openness that is no longer guarded by the fear of personal loss,
and face suffering with a grace that comes from knowing it cannot touch the core of what you are. The quest that began with a flight from pain has led you back to embrace the entirety of the human condition, but from a radically new perspective. So, the next time you feel the familiar ache of your own private suffering, the emptiness of a victory won, or the terror of an uncertain future, stop, take a breath, and ask yourself the one question that matters. Who is it that is suffering? What is this I that feels so burdened? And what would happen just for a moment if you were willing to let it go? What if, instead of trying to save yourself from the fire of life, you finally gave yourself permission to become the flame?